Welcome back. Today, as promised in the last episode, we will be back on the red DBS. In the last episode, we focused very much on the Aston Martin DBS V8 over there, giving it a final strip down, ready for all the metal work that is to come. And today we're going to be doing something slightly similar with the red DBS, but stripped down in a slightly more intense manner. As a lot of you know, I've been very much umming and ahhing whether I should keep this car or sell it, get a better chassis. At least for now, I've decided to keep it. As you could probably tell over the last few episodes, I was very much trying to convince myself to keep it. And at least for now, that's what I'm doing. Since the last episode on this car, I've stripped out the interior a little bit more, cleaned up the engine bay, removed any bits and bobs that were in the way. But today's job is to cut the front end off. What do I mean by that and why? Well, as you can tell, she's a bit rusty. So after a lot of consideration, I'm going to be continuing with the idea of a bit of a resto mod, tube frame front end, aftermarket engine, something crazy. And a lot of ideas spinning my head, but before we can even think about building this car up, we really need to take it back down. So it may be kind of hard to imagine from this angle, but a lot of the front chassis structure is actually very good, and let me show you why. So if you look down here, our main structural chassis area is very good. From the engine mounts to the chassis rails going back, it's actually somehow survived the test of time in comparison to the rest of the car. And that goes for it all the way to the front here. What we have lost on this car is basically from here upwards. Of course, everything is structural to a point, but that's not really our main structural area for the car. Originally, this would have come all the way around and created a square and been very rigid, but that area will be now removed in favor of the tube frame front end. So the tube frame front end will be retaining all this original structure, engine points, etc. Where it will differ is essentially from this rusty area up. We'll be refabricating the majority of the edge of the firewall. The center of it and the footwells are actually very good, but the tube frame will be built in favor of this area here. So we'll have essentially a rail going around, connecting at the front. So we're not actually removing a lot of the core structure of the car. The original structure will remain. In terms of the firewall itself, it's actually quite good. This area is fairly solid. Where it perishes is just beyond the firewall itself, which is where the doors mount. We've got this structural component. That is where we'll have to refabricate as well. This is not a particularly structurally load-bearing area. So we'll actually be able to make the whole thing more rigid than it was from factory using a better tube frame method. But that's for another episode. Before we can even consider that sort of thing, we need to strip down and see what we're left with, what needs actual repair work on the front end before we can build anything back up, and go from there. This side is far worse, and it's basically loose. It's just being held on by, I believe, a couple of spot welds and kind of the wiring. What's quite remarkable about this area is, obviously this piece is mounted a bit more rigidly. You can see over here, it's mounted to this piece of the firewall. However, I always thought this was going to be a seam weld all the way along. But I've just noticed it's actually just a few rather poor tack welds that hold this area on. So we're not going to do anything crazy, destroy things unnecessarily. We're just going to undo the tack welds and see how easily and damage-free we can get everything off. So let's do this. There we are. So as you can probably tell, that wasn't really connected by very much. So we didn't actually have to do much cutting. It was literally just wires and brake hoses and one tiny bit of, well, two tiny bits of metal that were holding it on. I'll quickly show you the piece we took off and then we'll get onto the other side. So here it is. So as you can see, it was basically just being held on here and this piece here. So all of this had already rusted away. We didn't have to do any cutting up there. It was just, well, that was the only bit connecting it, and that. As you see, I thought it was connected here as well, but it wasn't. I didn't realize there was a a crease there. So yeah, well, look at that. So that is off. That is where the chassis plate goes, which I've obviously got safely. There we have it. Wow. Rusty. So there you have it. A completely cut Aston front end. Before we inspect, I think it's time I give everything a little clean up and give myself a clean up, then we can see what we're left with. Well, there we have it, a stripped front end. It's quite remarkable seeing it in this form. I mean, I've certainly never seen one of these like this. Usually the top rails aren't affected so much to remove, but I've just basically cleaned it, removed all the loose stuff. There was lots more animal nests and that sort of thing hiding within. So I'm very glad that it's a bit cleaner and we've removed the most problemed areas from this car. And this is why I've said in the past this car isn't beyond saving. I know it looks like we've just wrecked the front end, but we really haven't. We've exposed the good bits. This area is remarkable. This is all completely solid. You know, it's quite fantastic. Again, all of this structural area is great. The only area that is poor on this front end is this upper rail, which is, I mean, it's still largely solid in areas, so it's still doing its, you know, it's still offering some support, but so easy to replace. You know, that's, yeah, the upper brace, that's it. And this area, we've lost a portion of the firewall here, but then from here downwards, it's very solid. So that's good. Obviously, footwell work, nothing crazy. You know, in terms of footwells and firewalls, those areas don't concern me at all. It's sheet metal. The structure is what concerns me, and it's very good. As I say, we've just got that area of an issue. This side is far better overall. It must have just been where it was sitting. We knew that from everything that was happening. This area, this footwell, this upper part of the firewall is actually very, very solid. But all it is a piece of sheet metal above this frame rail. So it's quite a basic setup. It really isn't a complex chassis. I look like I've just been through hell and back. So where do we go next with this car? Well, as you can imagine, a lot more cutting. We've now very much exposed the front end, which is fantastic, but the rust continues through the car. The front end is actually very good. The rails are brilliant throughout the car. Floor is a bit of an issue, and we now need to expose the rear chassis. So this involves removing the whole rear end of the car. So that will be what's coming up in the future episode. So you'll see basically a complete chassis of a DBS, which is quite exciting. Once we're at that point, the whole car needs to be media blasted so we can see what we're working with. It's so easy to weld this car up. It seems lazy just to not have the whole car media blasted so we can tackle every bit of rust there is, so the car has a long future in its new format. But once that's all done and we start to rebuild the car, I'll be welding the car from the back forward. And the reason I'm doing this is mainly because the back is ultimately the strongest area of the car. Generally the floors are okay, they're patchy, but the rails are fantastic all the way through. So we work from the back forward, and the reason that also is, though the front end is very good, there is a weak spot on the driver's side chassis rail. Because the car was suspended for so long, I have a slight concern at the back of my mind that the chassis may have bowed a tiny bit down on that side. So I want to start at the back, work my way forward, we'll get everything beautifully straight, and that seems like the natural route. We have to completely strip the car down with the media blasting, build the car back up in its original format, floors, all the general welding, outriggers, before we can even start to think about tube frames and the exciting bits. We need to have a good canvas before we start modifying it. But talking about the tube frame, I think you can kind of start to see what I'm going for and how it will look. It looks very much like the kind of American dragster cars right now, with just the lower chassis rail exposed. So imagine the firewall in one piece. All we'll really be doing is building a frame around the front. And of course that is to reinforce the front end, but we have retained the main supportive area of the front end. So largely it'll be to support body panels, it'll be to support the way everything opens up. I'm thinking of doing a full clamshell on the front, might not, haven't decided yet, but that sort of thing. So it's quite exciting really. We've got over the worst bit, which is this front end, and it's far better than I could have expected. I know that might sound ironic looking at it from the perspective of you guys, but either way, this doesn't concern me. I'm quite excited, and there's a lot more car to work with than I thought. So believe it or not, by far the most trickiest part of the build will be, once we've got the basic firewall, we'll actually, in my opinion, we'll be building the supports for the doors and that crash structure. It's not going to be terribly hard, but it's not going to be hard to fabricate. It's just ensuring everything is perfect, so doors close properly. Obviously we've got to put all the sills there. We'll have very good welding points because the sills will be there, which the sills go to here. As you can see on this side, this is where the sills meet. There's not much sill left, but we're missing that brace on the other side, but that's how it all sits. So once we have sills, it'll be a lot easier. Obviously it's just hard to envisage at this point because there's no sills, so those literally are floating. Very exciting journey ahead, and I'm thrilled that you guys are enjoying it, and I'm thrilled that a lot of you understand my perspective of it's not worth restoring. It's not financially viable to restore. Of course, the purist in me would love to restore it, but of course I've got the V8 car to restore, and that is retaining the majority of its originality. So this is quite a cool opportunity to do something different with a car that otherwise would have just been parted out, and certainly no restoration company would have ever taken it on, and not really many individuals would have taken it on. A few of you have complained in the comments that I need to stop looking back at the cars, but I can't help it because I love them. I love looking at them and seeing the evolution in each episode and throughout each day I'm here. So yeah, it's been a good day. Even though we've done something quite dramatic in today's episode, it hasn't been that long. It was actually a very quick process. So for the sake of you guys tuning in, I'm going to take all the wheels off now. I attempted to do this quite recently, a few days ago, and I couldn't get them off. They were all just completely jammed on. But I'd like to get new tyres on them, or new old tyres, just tyres that hold air, so we can actually have the car not sitting on a wonk, and just roll it around the workshop once I free those brakes. So yeah, let's do that. This one looks like it's hanging off. Oh, nice. This one is just not coming off. it's literally 30 minutes later. It's almost there. Yes. This saved the day, but even with this, it was a process. It's just so, I'll show you, it's just so gunged on. So you can see it was all quite greased up and rusty. I deserve an easy one after this. This one looks nice. Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. I bet you this is going to be like the other one. But at least we know the method now. Oh. And there she is. This picture actually reminds me of a press photograph that I'll put in now. It looks kind of cool. It looks like it shouldn't have ever had wheels. It's just a floating car. For reference, what these things are jack stacks. They're very similar to the type of plug-in flooring you get for outside, not like quick tracks and all that stuff. It's super industrial for moving lorries over hard surfaces. And this is another product that they do called jack stacks. I don't think it ever came out. I just got given them by the company years ago. So that's what's supporting it right now. It's not mature cheddar or anything like that. It is quite comfortably supporting the car. But on that note, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing. Those of you who are on the Patreon, thank you for supporting all of this bonus content. It's amazing. Doing this YouTube thing is fantastic in a way because it really pushes me to keep making progress. You know, it's quite easy for cars to sometimes sit for a long time because this isn't my job. These are for fun. And the pressure of YouTube, and it's a positive pressure of knowing people want to see what's coming next, has really helped me crack on with these cars. So that's fantastic. But yeah, it is a lot of work to get these videos out every 10 days or so. So please do consider liking, subscribing, sharing, checking out the Patreon where we have even more content. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode where we'll dive even deeper into this car. So thank you and take care.